Tonight, cabinet retreat. A minister under fire in the Trudeau government steps away from his post. The agreement to remove Randy Boissonnault.
He knew that the minister had falsely claimed to be Indigenous.
The member for Edmonton Centre has stepped down from cabinet.
The allegations that include false claims of Indigenous heritage. A bomb cyclone blasts through British Columbia, leaving thousands in the dark.
We just heard a large crash and a boom.
And turns deadly in the U.S. Plus, a parole board reversal after a plea from the families of Paul Bernardo's victims.
This is a really bit of a body blow for the families. There is no legal justification for this.
Also, accusations of a potato cartel involving Canadian companies.
The allegations are troubling if they prove to be true.
And the final game, set, and match for Rafael Nadal. An emotional end to a legendary career.
The great Rafa Nadal.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. We begin tonight with the Prime Minister's pivot involving a key member of his team. After initially defending his employment minister, today Justin Trudeau said Randy Boissonnault was out of cabinet. Boissonnault has been under scrutiny for months about his former medical supply business and claims about his Indigenous identity. CTV's Rachel Aiello starts us off again tonight with the political shakeup and who is taking over.
Not taking any questions, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced today that Randy Boissonnault is out of cabinet. In a brief statement, the Prime Minister's office said Trudeau and Boissonnault agreed his only Alberta minister would step away to focus on clearing the allegations made against him. Trudeau was pressed on the controversy during question period.
Up until a minute ago, he had a minister with a double identity. The Prime Minister knew that the minister was directing his business illegally from inside cabinet. He knew the minister had claimed there was another Randy when there was no other Randy. He knew that the minister had falsely claimed to be Indigenous in order to take money away from real Indigenous people, and yet he stood by him up until yesterday.
The member for Edmonton Centre has stepped down from cabinet to focus on clearing these allegations.
Boissonnault, not seen on the Hill today, has been under the microscope for months. From scrutiny over his former company's dealings, including claiming to be Indigenous-owned when bidding on federal contracts, to Boissonnault's past Indigenous ancestry assertions being discredited, calls were mounting for him to resign or be fired. Before the news broke, some Liberal MPs dodged questions about the controversy, saying Boissonnault could speak for himself. Others defended him.
Randy Boissonnault has always been a great ally to Indigenous caucus.
Later, caucus colleagues said they respected the decision.
I think now it's good that he takes the time to clear his name, which I'm confident he will do.
Boissonnault has said sorry for his shifting statements and that he was not aware of his ex-business partner's actions. The Assembly of First Nations called Randy's cabinet removal a teachable moment, a sentiment echoed by opposition MPs.
This is a clear signal to pretendians across the country. If you pretend to be Indigenous for the purpose of accessing Indigenous benefits, funding, or prestige, you will be found out.
Minister Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor will temporarily assume Boissonnault's cabinet portfolios as Trudeau plots a bigger shuffle in the coming weeks to deal with what's become a growing number of vacancies. Omar?
All right, Rachel, thank you. A massive cleanup is underway in British Columbia tonight after hurricane-force winds knocked down trees and cut power to nearly 300,000 people during a weather system called a bomb cyclone. CTV's Anna McMillan on the devastation.
So to see the rain coming down pretty hard.
Video out of North Vancouver Island captures a moment experienced by hundreds of thousands last night.
Whoa, power just went out.
Courtesy of wind gusts well over 100 kilometers an hour, taking out power lines and trees.
At the peak, we had about 150,000 customers on Vancouver Island alone. Over 272,000 customers have been impacted in the South Coast.
BC Hydro puts its estimated cleanup time at several days.
It ranks up there as one of the worst I've seen in 25 years doing this on the island.
The connector between the island's east and west coast, Highway 4, was severed by downed trees, trapping this semi-truck and its driver, though some skirted through.
Branches and trees and everything was coming down, and yeah, watched a few cars smash through some trees and branches and left on the side of the road, and yeah, I just squeaked through.
On the Mid-Island, the wind took a small plane for a joyride at the Courtenay Air Park, and in Victoria, it swamped a houseboat.
You almost can't get anything stronger on the west side of Vancouver or BC.
That meteorologist says it's the North Island and surrounding islands that saw the worst of it.
We're looking at Sartine Island on the north tip of Vancouver Island hitting gusts to 170 kilometers an hour. It's almost record-breaking for that station.
Choppy seas prompted a rare mass cancellation of ferry sailings.
We did make the call early this morning to cancel all the round trips on our major routes, as well as a whole slew of our minor routes, just out of an abundance of caution, really, for safety.
As thousands of people wait for their power to be restored, they're staring down another storm that could bring even more powerful winds to the island come Friday. Anna McMillan, CTV News.
Now, that same bomb cyclone also ripped through Washington state last night, leaving nearly 600,000 people without power.
We had some trees come down and a lot of things blew around, but we did okay.
Dozens of trees fell across roadways and toppled over power lines. Some landed on homes and others on vehicles. At least 2 people were killed. Torrential rain is expected to last for days. Climate scientists are calling it a once-in-a-decade system. Canada's Parole Board appears to be reversing course on a decision that prompted public backlash. It now says it is working to accommodate in-person victim impact statements at Paul Bernardo's parole hearing next week. This after a lawyer for the families of victims Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey revealed the families would be blocked from doing so. Here's CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Boissonnault.
The Parole Board had seemed to slam prison doors shut to the Mahaffey and French families, banning them from delivering victim impact statements in person in front of Paul Bernardo. But in a statement late this afternoon, it said it was working to accommodate the in-person presentation of statements by victims. Earlier today, the family's longtime lawyer, Tim Danson, called the decision forcing the families to appear via video conference devoid of logic and humanity.
Figuratively speaking, to look at the whites of Paul Bernardo's eyes and to the parole board and speak truth to them about the impact. And they don't want that sanitized through a computer screen. So there is no legal justification for this decision. It is unlawful.
Paul Bernardo was convicted in the violent kidnappings, sexual assaults, and murders of the 2 teenagers in the 1990s, crimes that horrified Canadians. Bernardo is serving a life sentence but is entitled to periodic parole hearings, including the one scheduled for next week at the medium-security prison La Macasa in Quebec, where he's now serving his time. Danson had dismissed the board's explanation that it was unable to ensure safety of all hearing attendees. The government had indicated the parole board makes decisions independently, but the Conservatives called it unacceptable.
Absolutely, positively awful. This has to change. It's just so wrong on so many levels.
The parole board also noted that most hearings are via video conference and that the technology had increased victim participation in recent years. But to the French and Mahaffey families, the idea of being relegated to the coldness of speaking from behind a computer screen was simply cruel. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has picked former Michigan Congressman Pete Hoekstra to be the next U.S. ambassador to Canada. Trump announcing the nomination on Truth Social today, calling him, quote, a great help to our campaign. Hoekstra has been in Congress for 20 years and previously served as the U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands during Trump's first term. He replaces David Cohen. And the U.S. House Ethics Committee has, for now, rejected releasing a report on an investigation into Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General Matt Gaetz.
Mr. Chairman, you guys vote to release this report?
Deadlocked along party lines, the Democrats want it released. The Republicans do not. The report looks into allegations from 2 women claiming Gaetz paid them for sex, including one who says she was 17 years old at the time. Gaetz has denied the allegations. 2 Canadian companies have been named in proposed class action lawsuits in the United States, alleging they are part of a so-called potato cartel that's fixed the price of frozen products for years. CTV's Sarah Plowman has the details.
The companies behind these frozen fries share more than shelves. They're both defendants in a pair of U.S. class action lawsuits. Canadian companies McCain Foods and Cavendish Farms are 2 of 4 potato processors accused of conspiring to illegally fix their prices in the U.S. and overcharge customers.
The allegations are troubling if they prove to be true.
One lawsuit was filed by a consumer who alleges the companies have access to each other's pricing data, saying with direct line of communication to each other, the potato cartel moves prices skyward in lockstep, harming all purchasers of potatoes in the process. The other lawsuit was launched by a grocery chain that alleges from 2021 until now, the companies brought in lockstep price increases that allowed them to realize unprecedented margins. None of the allegations have been tested in court. McCain Foods tells CTV News it strongly disputes any allegation the company violated antitrust laws or any other laws with respect to the sale of frozen potato products, adding it will vigorously defend the recently filed lawsuits.
Is this collusive behavior then, or is it just coincidence? We've seen it before in the U.S. where they brought allegations of price fixing and conspiring to fix the market. It's a very difficult thing to prove.
Analysts say raising prices in line with competitors is nothing unusual.
The big part of this is that you don't speak to them about it. You don't communicate with them about it.
A spokesperson for Canada's Competition Bureau says, quote, they're aware of enforcement action taken in other jurisdictions relating to this industry, adding they can't confirm whether they are or will be investigating these companies. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
And 2 furniture giants many Canadians are familiar with, Leon's and its subsidiary, The Brick, are at the center of an investigation by the Competition Bureau looking into whether they deceptively marketed their products to customers. Paul Hollingsworth on exactly what the watchdog is examining.
Leon's owns The Brick. Both stores specialize in furniture and appliances, and both chains are facing serious allegations from Canada's Competition Bureau. They include end dates for sales and promotions that are false or misleading, inflated regular prices when making savings claims, and sale claims with no reference to the amount of the discount. In a joint statement, Leon's and The Brick said they are committed to complying with all regulatory requirements and are cooperating with the Bureau. So far, there is no final conclusion that any wrongdoing has been committed. If found guilty, the punishment could be severe.
Companies have been fined in the millions of dollars previously for these exact kinds of offenses.
Anyone who has any suspicions or concerns about alleged deceptive marketing practices is asked to contact the Competition Bureau. It's unknown what prompted this investigation. Marketing analyst Clive Veroni says these allegations could be a turnoff and a breach of trust for customers.
We are heading into a major sales period. We're heading into Black Friday, and right after that will be Christmas sales. This is a critical sales period for the company.
Canada's Competition Bureau has not offered any timeline for how long this investigation could take. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
And another investigation at the Calgary Zoo reveals the death of a young gorilla last week was a tragic case of human error.
The gorilla care team member intended to activate a door to separate Ayari from other members of the troop for an individual animal training session, but mistakenly activated the wrong door, resulting in Ayari being struck by the door and sustaining traumatic head injuries.
The zoo says the staff member is being reassigned. Enhanced safeguards will be put in place, and that the gorilla team members will have to undergo training on using the hydraulic doors. There have been at least 4 animal deaths at the zoo since 2011 that were blamed on human error. A group of scientists that includes a virologist from Saskatoon say they have new evidence about the origins of COVID-19. They believe it jumped from infected animals to humans in a Chinese seafood market rather than a leak from a lab. CTV's Alison Bamford explains.
A team of scientists is strengthening its case that COVID-19 didn't come from a Chinese lab, instead a seafood market in Wuhan. But up until now, conflicting evidence made it hard to prove that animals at the market were the source of transmission.
We have evidence that the infection spread outward in the human population from the market. Now we have information that proves that those animals were at the market, and we know that at least some of them were susceptible.
Like the raccoon dog, the most common animal at the market, according to DNA samples collected from the area. But that evidence hasn't been able to tell scientists if they were actually infected yet.
There will always be speculation because one can never fully understand every aspect of that. But I think that this does hazard a very close approximation of where the viruses come from.
COVID-19's origin has been widely debated. In a classified document last year, the U.S. Department of Energy reported with low confidence the pandemic most likely came from a Wuhan laboratory leak.
I think it's very, very difficult to explain a laboratory origin with the evidence that we have now.
Possible answers to arguably one of the most critical questions of the pandemic. How did it start?
It's always important to know as much as we can about a pandemic or about viruses to figure out how they spread, how they develop, and how they get where they are so that we can help reduce the risk of them happening in the future.
Researchers from this lab are performing more tests to see what other animals could have been susceptible to the virus. Based on the existing evidence, they say we may never know which infected animal started the pandemic. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
Coming up, a deadly house explosion. The blast that rocked an Ohio suburb, plus a tennis legend retires the racket. Dramatic video tonight of a deadly house explosion in Ohio.
We've shut the propane off. We still have heavy fire involvement that we're attacking at this time.
A doorbell camera captured the moment the blast sent debris flying through the air. 2 people inside the home were killed.
I heard a loud bang or boom.
Fell out of bed, come outside, seen a gentleman running that was currently working inside the residence. It's shocking. His hair was still on fire when he was out.
Neighbors say that man was a technician working on the home. An investigation is now underway. Ukraine has reportedly fired British-made long-range missiles into Russia a day after launching American-made ones, sparking a nuclear threat from Moscow. Another threat prompted Canada and the U.S. to temporarily close their embassies in Kyiv today. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin explains.
Ukraine's military searching the skies over Kyiv as Canada and the U.S. briefly shuttered their embassies for the first time since Russia's invasion. Diplomats warned to shelter in place.
The embassy put that alert out based on a possible threat.
The threat, a fake, says Ukraine's military intelligence, accusing Russia of a psychological attack. It comes after President Joe Biden authorized the use of U.S.-made longer-range missiles known as ATACMS. Ukraine firing a new round of ballistic missiles hit a Russian weapons warehouse. After 3 years of bombardments and pain, Ukrainians welcome the ability to strike back.
Yes, it's an escalation. Yes, it's risky. Yes, these are called long-range missiles, but they really have only a range of 300 kilometers, so they can't reach Moscow.
But Russia calls this a new phase in the war. President Vladimir Putin lowering the bar for his country to use nuclear weapons, ratcheting up tensions even more.
Bullies know that their victims are capable of hitting back. They react badly to it. That's what Russia is doing. So we certainly support Ukraine's right to defend itself.
Biden also allowing Ukraine to use America's stockpile of battery-powered anti-personnel mines to fight off Russia.
These are mines that are going to be inert and deactive in at the most 2 weeks from now. So these don't pose a threat to civilian communities.
Washington says the policy change follows Russia's changing tactics, with 11,000 North Korean troops and artillery now in the fight.
The Biden administration scrambling to rush as much aid to Ukraine, knowing President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to end this war quickly. Omar?
All right, Joy, thanks. Still ahead. The stunning amount paid for a sweet piece of art. Some pricey sales at auction to tell you about, beginning with an edible piece of art we told you about last night that just sold. Maurizio Catalan's piece, Comedian, also known as a banana taped to a wall, fetched nearly $9 million Canadian at Sotheby's in New York. Estimated value was about $1.5 million. Meanwhile, a more traditional piece of an eerily lit streetscape by surrealist René Magritte sold for $169 million Canadian dollars at Christie's, New York today, a record-breaking amount for the Belgian. And Gordon Lightfoot's treasured Gibson guitar from that hit song Sundown sold for $499,000 Canadian at an estate auction over the weekend. A piece of Canadian musical history. After the break,
the emotions, feeling the national anthem for the last time.
the King of Clay plays his last match. Tennis great Rafael Nadal has played his final match, his legendary career leaving an everlasting impression both on and off the court. Here's CTV's Alex Carpa.
This was the moment it all came to an end for tennis legend Rafael Nadal. His illustrious career is now over.
But today was always going to be about the great Rafa Nadal.
Nadal stepping off the court for the last time Tuesday after Spain lost to the Netherlands in the quarterfinals of the Davis Cup. After over 2 decades, the 38-year-old announced last month that this would be his final tournament.
It's in some ways good. Maybe if that was my last match, that was my last match. If nothing happens. I lost my first match in the Davis Cup, and I lost my last one. So we closed the circle.
Several tennis stars congratulated Nadal on his career, including another legend of the game, Roger Federer, a longtime rival and close friend. He took to X earlier this week saying, "I want you to know that your old friend is always cheering for you and will be cheering just as loud for everything you do next." Nadal telling reporters that it's been an emotional journey.
I tried to do my best. I tried to, at the same time, to stay as positive as possible in every single moment, to play with the right energy. Was not enough.
Nadal enters retirement with 2 Olympic gold medals and over 1,000 career match wins. He also has 14 French Open wins, which is the most by any player at any major, and also has 22 Grand Slam titles. Alex Carpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Just a remarkable 23-year career. That's a snapshot of this Wednesday. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and see you tomorrow.